Have you ever felt like the more agreeable you are, the less people actually see you? Like the kinder you become, the more invisible you feel. You try to keep the peace. You say the right things. You avoid conflict at all costs. But no matter how careful you are, it still doesn't feel safe. You're still overlooked, still exhausted, still not respected. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that being a good person meant staying quiet, that real strength was swallowing discomfort, suppressing your needs, and always being available, no matter the cost. But that wasn't a moral choice. That was conditioning. A quiet survival tactic you picked up early on. Don't draw attention. Don't rock the boat. Don't make them uncomfortable. And for a while, it worked. But now it's killing your spirit. The Stoics saw through that illusion. To them, goodness wasn't about approval. It was about alignment. They didn't chase acceptance. They lived by principle. They knew that peace, bought through self-erasure, was not peace at all. It was captivity. This video isn't about making you colder. It's about making it clear. Through Stoic philosophy, we'll challenge the lie that goodness means being agreeable and show you how to reclaim your voice, your dignity, and your presence. If you've ever felt that the cost of being good was your own sense of self, stay with me, because this is where you stop asking for permission and start living by your own standard. Part 1. The trap of trying to be a good person. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that creeps into the life of a man who's trying too hard to be seen as good. It doesn't show up all at once. It builds quietly over the years, through quiet nods, held back truths, and 1,000 polite silences. You weren't chasing attention. You were chasing approval, respect, peace. But somewhere along the way, being the good one started costing you something essential: your presence. Take Jeremy, a father of 2 and a middle manager at a logistics firm. No scandals in his life, no drama, just steady, dependable, agreeable. The guy who always covered extra shifts, who never raised his voice, who smiled through missed promotions and birthday parties he didn't want to attend. People liked Jeremy, but no one really saw him. One day, after working through a weekend for a colleague who never returned the favor, Jeremy broke down, not from rage, but from something colder: emptiness. He said, "I feel like I've been fading for years." He wasn't tired from doing too much. He was tired of never being real. This is what happens when we confuse moral goodness with emotional invisibility. And Stoicism warns us of this trap. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." But what most people miss is this. Marcus wasn't interested in being seen as good. He was interested in being aligned with reason and truth. His virtue didn't make him soft, it made him immovable. As emperor, he faced betrayal, war, plague, and political pressure, and yet he held his center. Because to him, goodness wasn't performance, it was discipline. Seneca echoed the same idea in harsher terms. He said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." In other words, when you betray yourself out of fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, you're not being virtuous. You're afraid. The truth is, the world doesn't reward quiet compliance. It exploits it. When you're always agreeable, always flexible, always helpful, you are not seen as virtuous. You're seen as convenient. And when your presence no longer serves someone else's comfort, you're dismissed. No apology, no outcry, just erased. Consider Rosa Parks, not a Stoic by label, but deeply Stoic by nature. She didn't shout, she didn't argue, she just said no. She refused to give up her seat, not out of anger, but out of alignment. Her act was quiet, but unshakable. That's Stoic presence. It doesn't ask for permission, it doesn't chase approval, it stands because it must. So ask yourself, what kind of goodness have you been practicing? Is it rooted in values or in fear? Does it anchor you or erase you? The Stoics would tell you plainly, goodness without strength is not virtue, it's vulnerability. And when your kindness comes at the cost of your clarity, you're not living a moral life, you're living a performative one. This is the deeper trap, the one no one talks about, that most of what we call being a good person is just fear. Fear of conflict, rejection, being seen as too much. But fear is not a compass. And it's certainly not Stoic, because real virtue, real Stoic virtue, is not afraid to be seen. It doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't shape-shift to fit into someone else's comfort zone. So again I ask, when you're being good, who are you protecting? And who's paying the price? Because when you trade your dignity for approval, the world might thank you, but it will never respect you. And in the next part, we go further. We'll explore where this compulsion to be liked really comes from, and how it was never a virtue, but a training, a survival tactic you no longer need. Part 2. The Stoic origin of pleasing others. No man is born desperate for approval. That instinct, to blend in, to be liked, to avoid making others uncomfortable, is not a part of your nature. It was programmed into you. From the earliest moments of life, you were corrected before you were understood. Don't say that. Be polite. You'll upset someone. You weren't taught self-mastery. You were taught image management, not through wisdom, but through the repeated suggestion that to be accepted, you must be pleasing. Not real, just easy to be around. And so, slowly, you adapted. You stopped asking too many questions. You dulled your sharp edges. You apologized for needing space, and each time you did, you handed over a piece of your prohibition, your inner authority, your power to choose. What began as survival became identity. You started calling it humility, empathy, being a nice guy. But the Stoics would have called it what it really is, a collapse of the self. Epictetus warned us that, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. He understood that most people do not want you to be virtuous. They want you to be agreeable, because your truth, when it is clear and firm, disturbs people who benefit from your compliance. Take Elias. Everyone said he was the kindest man they knew. He never said no, never raised his voice. He showed up early, stayed late, and forgave easily. But inside, Elias was numb. Years of self-sacrifice had stripped him of all clarity. One night, after being passed over for a promotion, again, he didn't feel anger. He felt nothing. And in that moment of nothingness, he realized he hadn't just muted his frustration, he had muted himself. This is what happens when the need to be seen as good outweighs the need to be whole. You become agreeable at the cost of your identity. You avoid conflict, not because you're at peace, but because you're terrified of losing acceptance. But that isn't Stoic. That's slavery to perception. Seneca said, "He who always agrees with the crowd, even in good times, is already preparing his downfall." Because there is nothing virtuous about letting the judgment of others dictate your values. When your compass is external approval, your life becomes reactive. You say yes when your soul screams no. You absorb disrespect to avoid discomfort, and you call it virtue, but it's not. It's fear, rebranded as morality. The Stoics remind us that real peace comes from alignment, not avoidance. Marcus Aurelius didn't ask to be loved, he asked to be just. He didn't try to win favor, he tried to stay true. He wrote to himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That includes the truth of your own limits, your voice, your time. So ask yourself, why does saying no feel like betrayal? Why does drawing a boundary feel like you're doing something wrong? It's because you've been trained to equate self-respect with selfishness. But the Stoics knew better. Self-respect isn't a luxury. It's the foundation of virtue. You cannot serve others wisely if you are constantly abandoning yourself. Here's the hard truth. The more you perform goodness, the further you drift from the kind of presence that commands respect. The more you avoid discomfort, the more you create resentment. And that resentment doesn't just poison your relationships, it poisons your soul. Fear taught you to keep quiet, but fear is not a Stoic teacher. The time has come to reclaim your inner authority, to choose integrity over approval, to stop performing for the crowd and start standing in your center. And that journey begins by shedding the illusion that moral performance leads to respect. In the next part, we'll confront that myth and show how the Stoics built their presence not through agreement, but through unapologetic strength. Part 3. The Stoic strength behind the illusion of goodness. There's a quiet, corrosive lie that lives inside many men who try to live well. The belief that if you are kind, patient, and honest, the world will treat you accordingly. That goodness, if practiced sincerely, will somehow protect you. It won't. And the sooner you accept that, the freer you become. The Stoics never taught that virtue would be rewarded. They taught that virtue is its own reward, and that the world often confuses goodness with softness. In a world driven by perception, kindness without clarity is not honored, it is overlooked, or worse, exploited. Marcus Aurelius understood this. As emperor, he faced betrayal, war, disease, and political pressure from every direction. Yet his journals weren't filled with bitterness or begging. They were reminders to himself to remain just, to remain grounded, even when the world offered no applause. Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others, he wrote. He knew the world might never understand him, and still, he chose to stay aligned. He didn't chase praise, he cultivated presence. But Marcus was no pacifist. He didn't rule by charm. He ruled with principle and steel. His calm wasn't passive. It was power held in reserve. And this is what modern men forget, that goodness without boundary is not virtue, it's vulnerability. Epictetus was sharper. It is not enough to possess virtue, he said. You must carry it well. Virtue, in his eyes, was not some quiet internal trophy. It was a way of moving through a harsh world with clarity, not weakness. If you are good, but you're afraid to speak plainly, afraid to be misunderstood, afraid to lose favor, then you are not grounded in Stoic virtue. You are tethered to the illusion that people will reward your silence. Seneca, who survived the political court of Nero, warned us with brutal clarity. He who acts like a good man among those who are not prepares his own ruin. He wasn't condemning morality, he was condemning naivety. It's not enough to be good, you have to be respected. And that means carrying yourself with the kind of strength that doesn't ask to be liked. Fred was a youth counselor known for his warmth and compassion. Every week he gave his best. He listened, forgave, and guided. But the kids didn't respect him. They were interrupted, dismissed, and ignored. Until one day, a new mentor arrived. He didn't shout, he didn't demand, but when he spoke, the room went still. He wasn't threatening, he was immovable, calm but solid, present. That's the difference. That's what presence looks like when it's not desperate for approval. The Stoic isn't emotionally detached to avoid life. He detaches from illusion. He sees the world clearly. He knows the world doesn't always reward what is right. It often rewards what is firm, what is clear, what refuses to be manipulated. So no, you don't need to become cold or cruel. You don't need to abandon compassion. But you do need to stop thinking that being good will automatically earn you protection. It won't. What earns you protection is presence. What earns you respect is self-possession. Marcus Aurelius didn't go unnoticed because he was agreeable. He was respected because he didn't flinch. He didn't chase approval. He carried weight. And if you want to live with Stoic strength, you must learn to do the same. You don't need to speak loudly. You need to speak from a place of alignment. You don't need to dominate. You need to stop asking for permission. In the next part, we'll confront what happens when your goodness becomes obedience, and how to finally draw the line between being virtuous and being used. Part 4. The Stoic line between virtue and voluntary slavery. There is a fatal confusion that ruins far too many lives. The belief that to be good, you must be agreeable. That real virtue is measured by how quietly you can swallow disrespect. How many times can you forgive without reflection? How long can you tolerate being overlooked in the name of keeping the peace? But let's be clear, that is not Stoic virtue. That is self-abandonment dressed as nobility. True Stoicism does not ask you to erase yourself. It asks you to see clearly. And clarity demands you recognize when your so-called kindness has become compliance, when your tolerance has become submission, when your goodness has become obedience to expectations that do not serve you. This isn't theoretical, it's real, it's lived. Maria was a schoolteacher known for her warmth. She stayed late, answered emails at midnight, covered for colleagues who disappeared without notice. She was the one everyone leaned on, the good one. But over time, her silence became an expectation. Her willingness became an obligation. The day she finally refused a last-minute request, she was met with disappointment. Not because she had done something wrong, but because she had trained everyone to believe her boundaries didn't exist. This is the curse of naive goodness. It lives on the assumption that people will recognize your sacrifice, that they'll reward your compliance, that patience will be met with fairness. But more often, what you receive is quiet dismissal, subtle exploitation, and a life where your needs are always the last to be acknowledged. The Stoics rejected this kind of delusion. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And what is constant self-erasure, if not a life spent avoiding friction, never drawing lines, never letting your values meet resistance? When you choose to be endlessly agreeable, you train the world to expect your silence, and they will. They will assume your time is theirs, that your peace is negotiable, that your generosity is bottomless. And the moment you draw a line, the moment you shift, they will say, "You've changed." But you haven't. You've finally stopped betraying yourself. The Stoics never encouraged cruelty, but they despised self-deception. And there is nothing more deceptive than convincing yourself that being used is a sign of moral strength. So ask yourself, is your kindness protecting your dignity or exposing it? Is your calm rooted in strength or in the fear of being seen as difficult? Is your version of goodness anchored in truth or in the terror of being unloved if you ever say no? Because if your answer leans toward fear, you're not being good. You're being dominated. And domination, no matter how gently it's wrapped, is the opposite of Stoic living. The truth is, you can be firm and still be kind. You can say no and still be compassionate. You can draw a boundary without drawing blood. Real virtue does not require your disappearance. It requires your clarity. Marcus Aurelius ruled with justice, but he was not endlessly tolerant. Epictetus taught self-control, but never submission to abuse. Stoicism doesn't demand that you become a martyr. It demands that you become precise, grounded, accountable to your own reason, not other people's approval. You were not put here to be endlessly available. You were not made to be pleasant at the expense of being real. You were not born to serve as the emotional servant of everyone who finds your silence useful. There is a better way, a middle path, a space where you don't have to become hard to stop being soft, where you can love but never beg, help but never be used, forgive but never forget who you are. And in the next part, we'll talk about how to reclaim that middle ground, the Stoic path to inner strength. Not through withdrawal, but through deliberate presence. Because your life doesn't need more performance. It needs more power. Anchored in principle. Part 5. The Stoic path to inner strength. There comes a moment in every man's life when he wakes up to the cost of his own compliance. He said yes when he meant no. He stayed silent when he should have spoken. He's tolerated things that quietly drained him. And finally, he decides, never again. But what follows isn't always clarity. Sometimes it's overcorrection. After years of being too agreeable, too soft, too available, many men swing to the other extreme. They go from saying yes to saying nothing, from pleasing everyone to trusting no one. They shut down, they grow cold, they confuse withdrawal with power, and it feels like strength, because it's not weakness. But that's not Stoicism. That's emotional self-protection, pretending to be a principle. The Stoics warned against this reactionary living. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is a slave to his reactions, and that includes the reaction to your past." Real inner strength isn't a wall you build to keep the world out. It's the quiet authority that lets you choose when to open, when to close, and when to walk away. Without apology or anger. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it asks you to feel less, to become detached, aloof, unaffected. But the Stoic path isn't about feeling less. It's about being governed less by emotion. It's not about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming intentional. So, how do you begin? First, reclaim your voice. You've been trained to think that speaking up is selfish, that setting a boundary makes you arrogant. But the Stoic sees it differently. Speaking truth without cruelty is not selfishness, it's self-respect. When you say, "I do not accept this," you are not causing harm. You are honoring your reasoned judgment, your prohorisis. That is the core of Stoic strength. Second, learn the art of refusal. No is not a rejection of humanity. It is a declaration of your values. And it doesn't have to come with justification. A quiet, grounded no spoken from alignment carries more power than 1,000 polite explanations. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That rule applies not only to your actions but also to your boundaries. Third, expect resistance. When you start changing, when you stop making yourself small, people will notice. Some will feel threatened, some will call you difficult or selfish or cold. But as Epictetus taught, it's not what they say, it's how you respond that matters. Growth to those who've benefited from your silence will always feel like betrayal. That doesn't make it wrong, it means it's working. Consider Lena, a woman known for her warmth. She was the dependable one, the helper, the friend who never asked for anything in return. But eventually she changed. She began carving out time for herself, saying no, prioritizing rest. And people didn't celebrate her growth, they questioned it. "You've changed," someone said. And she had. She hadn't become cruel, she had become clear. Fourth, stop seeking universal understanding. Not everyone will get it, and they're not supposed to. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. You owe no loyalty to the version of you that kept others comfortable. You owe loyalty to the self that lives with clarity, even if it's misunderstood." Fifth, replace the need for acceptance with a commitment to authenticity. When you begin acting from principle instead of fear, you will unsettle some, but you will inspire others. Most importantly, you will respect yourself. And that is the only kind of respect no one can take from you. This is the Stoic path. Not a life of coldness, but of clarity. Not a retreat from connection, but a return to integrity. Seneca never asked us to be feared, only to be firm. Marcus never asked us to please, only to live in accordance with reason. You don't need to be hard to become whole. You don't need to perform to be powerful. You only need to choose presence over approval, truth over comfort, strength over performance. And in the next part, we'll face the turning point. Will you keep diluting yourself to be liked? Or will you finally step into the kind of presence that doesn't beg for permission to exist? Because that's what's at stake. Not just how the world sees you, but how you see yourself. Part 6. The Stoic decision to reclaim yourself. Let's stop pretending. How long will you keep wearing the mask of the good one? The soft-spoken, agreeable, endlessly tolerant version of yourself that never causes waves, never asks for more, and always keeps the peace, even when it comes at the cost of your own. How much longer will you trade your time, your energy, your dignity for the illusion of being morally acceptable? Because that's what it is, an illusion. It looks like virtue, it sounds like humility, but it feels like captivity. A silent imprisonment dressed up in polite praise. People say, "You're dependable, easy to work with, low maintenance." What they really mean is, you won't push back. You won't say no. You won't make them uncomfortable. But here's what no one tells you. That kind of goodness doesn't earn you respect. It earns you usefulness. And when your usefulness runs out, you are replaced. Quietly, without ceremony, without apology. Because the world does not adjust itself to your moral intentions. It responds only to your actions, or your lack of them. And no one is coming to free you. No one will hand you back the years you gave away trying to stay likable. No one will reward you for how many times you said yes when your soul said no. That part is on you. You can continue to play the role society handed you, calm, selfless, agreeable, and you will continue to be overlooked. Or you can wake up, and you can decide that your kindness will no longer be automatic, that your generosity will be offered from strength, not extracted through expectation. That is the Stoic decision. To stop performing goodness, to stop being ruled by fear, to start living by principle, and to finally, deliberately reclaim yourself. Marcus Aurelius didn't beg to be loved, he lived to be just. Epictetus didn't silence his truth to be accepted, he spoke with alignment. Seneca didn't avoid discomfort, he faced it head-on and used it as a proving ground. That's what the Stoic path demands, not withdrawal but precision, not loudness but clarity, not compliance but character. So draw the line, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Stop handing out pieces of yourself to people who haven't earned them. Stop apologizing for taking up space in a world that only ever rewards those who do. You don't need to be feared, but you do need to be felt. You don't need to be loud, but you do need to be clear, because if your version of goodness requires you to be invisible, then it's not goodness, it's performance. And if your worth is still tied to how likable you are, you'll spend your life negotiating your existence. And no Stoic ever lived like that. The question now is not, am I a good person? The question is, am I a free one? Are you living from alignment or from approval? Are your values guiding you, or are you still being ruled by the need to be liked? There's nothing wrong with being kind, but your kindness must be protected by clarity. Your peace must be guarded by boundaries. Your presence must be anchored in principle. Because when you stop chasing permission to exist, when you stop performing and start standing, something shifts. You become quiet, grounded, untouchable. Not because you're hardened, but because you're all. That's the Stoic way. If this message stirred something in you, don't just walk away. Sit with it, reflect, and when you're ready, say it out loud or in the comments. I don't need permission to exist. Let that be the beginning, not of rebellion, but of return. To your clarity, to your dignity, to your self-respect. Because this is your life, and it's time you started living it as your own. You've spent enough time trying to be good for everyone else. What the Stoics teach us isn't about chasing approval, but about standing in our own truth. Clear, steady, and unapologetic. Your life doesn't need more performance. It needs presence. So ask yourself, are you living for approval, or are you living in alignment with your own values? If this message hit home, don't let it pass. Reflect on what you need to reclaim. Share a Stoic affirmation in the comments, like, "I don't need permission to exist." Subscribe if you're ready to live with more clarity, less apology, and real self-respect. This is your turning point. Choose it.